Between DRAM pricing and AI everything, it's pretty difficult to get all that excited about products that you can just go out and buy right now. So it almost came as a bit of a shock to me that after testing out this little NAS from Link Plus, I came away from it feeling like this system, even with the current pricing, feels like a pretty decent value. Sure, there are some things about it that I don't love, but it includes some fantastic features that are all packed into a very small and useful form factor. Plus, in my opinion, this little guy doesn't suffer from a huge flaw that, well, I think just about every other affordable NAS appliance does. So in this video, I'm going to show you my experience with this and why I think it's actually a pretty good value if you're looking for a fast flash-based NAS or a little home server. So let's get started. This is the LinkStation N2 from Link Plus, and as is usually the case when I get around to covering products that I'm interested in, this isn't brand new by any means. I think it came out like 9 months ago. The N2 is a compact NAS appliance with room for two 2.5-inch SATA drives, as well as 4 NVMe SSDs, and also features 10 gigabit networking. Unfortunately, I decided it might be cool to take a look at this for the first time after NVMe SSDs pretty much doubled in price, which, yeah, that kinda sucks. But at least there's no annoying AI branding or anything. Regardless, I think this is still a really cool system that can provide a ton of value in the right use cases. With 10 gigabit networking, this could work well in a work environment with multiple workstations all needing to quickly access the same data, like for example, a team of video editors. Or it might be a great addition to a mini home lab setup where you don't need a ton of bulk storage, but want some fast network attached storage that's available for multiple servers. Now I do want to throw in a quick disclaimer that Link Plus did send this over to me so that I could take a look at it. However, as is always the case whenever I cover products, no money exchanged hands, they don't get to see this video until you do, and they have absolutely no editorial control. Now someone that does pay me is the sponsor of this video, Private Internet Access. Well, technically they pay me, but I've also been a happy customer of PIA now for nearly 2 years, and I like it for quite a few reasons. One, it works well on all of my devices, from my phone to my laptop running Fedora to servers in my home lab. In fact, I use PIA pretty much constantly because it works well with a Docker container called Gluten. That lets me quickly and easily route a bunch of other containers through PIA servers. And speaking of servers, they have a ton of them across 91 different countries. Plus, they offer a bunch of other useful features like split tunneling, connection automation, and more. And I also love that they have a strict no logs policy that's verified by third-party audits. So if you're looking for an affordable, reliable, and feature-rich VPN, make sure to check out PIA by using my link and code down in the description. With that, you can get 83% off plus 4 months for free. The N2 has a bit of a unique design with sort of a two-tone vibe that I find looks quite nice. It also has some LED lighting on the front that surprisingly I didn't find overbearing or anything. I'm a fan of the look, but the plastic shell does pick up fingerprints pretty easily. Obviously, it's pretty small, and with a width of around 8.3 inches, it's just small enough to fit perfectly into a 10-inch rack. On the front, there's a power button, as well as those LEDs I mentioned that show drive status as well as your network connection. But if you flip down this neat little cover, which is definitely not awkward to do sometimes, you'll find the two 2.5-inch drive bays, as well as a 10 gigabit per second USB-C port. On the back, there's a 3.5mm audio jack, HDMI port, a single 10 gigabit per second USB Type-A port, and then two USB 2.0 ports. Then there's a DC jack for the included 60 watt 12 volt power supply, and the 10 gigabit RJ45 port. This uses the Marvell AQC113 controller, which, well, I've had a few issues with in the past, but we'll come back to that here in a bit. On the bottom, you can pop off these little doors to get to the 4 M.2 NVMe sockets. These are all toolless thanks to this cool little mechanism, which is really easy and kind of fun to use, but this does limit you to just 2280 form factor NVMe's. You might also notice this tiny little USB drive that's plugged into a hidden USB 2.0 port. This is actually the boot drive, and believe it or not, I think this is pretty awesome. Rather than shipping some half-baked proprietary NAS operating system that's just a slightly different flavor of every other half-baked NAS operating system that's probably just a slightly different flavor of Debian, Link Plus actually ships this with Unraid pre-installed. And they also include this little code in the box that you can redeem for a starter license. Considering that supports up to 6 drives, I think it's pretty much perfect for a device like this, and I think that's a fantastic decision. Unraid is great for somewhat techie people that might be considering something like this, but don't want to go installing something like TrueNAS. Obviously, some people aren't going to like Unraid, but, well, there's nothing stopping you from installing whatever you want. In fact, another cool feature of the N2 is that it also comes with a built-in 128GB eMMC module that's perfect as a boot drive. I actually think this was originally for an operating system that Link Plus does have. I think it's called Link OS, but well, maybe they made the right call by just doing the Unraid deal. Now, speaking of the eMMC, let's talk about the other internal specs. If you've seen any videos of mine covering mini PCs or NAS systems, it probably won't come as a shock that Link Plus went with the Intel N100 here. The N100 is a fairly modern little quad-core that doesn't offer a ton of performance, but manages to still hold up pretty well for light desktop usage, and is usually really solid for running most home server type tasks. But one thing that's great about the N100 is that what it might lack in raw performance, it makes up for in efficiency. Plus, its onboard UHD graphics are fantastic for video transcoding workloads if you're looking to run something like Plex or Jellyfin. The N2 also features 16GB of onboard LPDDR5 memory. And yeah, it definitely sucks that you can't upgrade this RAM in the future, but at least for right now, the good news is that, well, it actually comes with RAM. When I first hooked it up and turned it on, I found that there's nothing preventing you from just easily hitting the escape key to get into the BIOS menu. And there were actually a lot of options available here, which is going to come in handy soon. I wanted to try out the Unraid install though, so I dropped in a couple of NVMe SSDs as well as two 2.5-inch SATA SSDs. The system booted right into Unraid, and I had no issues activating my license, setting up my array and pool, and then creating a user and shares like I normally would. It was just Unraid, and it worked. However, when I first started copying some files over, I was a bit concerned to see much lower than 10 gigabit speeds. This made sense though once I realized that it was plugged into a 2.5 gigabit switch, which might have been an issue. So after actually hooking it up to a 10 gig switch, I was seeing much better performance. That said, it still wasn't quite the 1 gigabyte per second you would expect to see with 10 gig. Now I know some of you might already know what's going on here, and spoiler, it isn't that Marvell network controller. In fact, the network interface was rock solid throughout all of my usage and testing. Instead, it was actually the NVMe sockets, or more accurately, the CPU. As I've covered many times now with various devices, the N100 has one really big limitation, which is that it only provides 9 lanes of PCIe Gen 3. Those lanes have to be allocated out for all sorts of things like the network card, the SATA controller, and of course the PCIe NVMe sockets. Obviously, with only 9 lanes available, all 4 of these slots weren't going to support the 4 lanes of PCIe you might normally expect, but I was at least hoping that maybe 1 or 2 of them at least were by 2, but sadly all 4 slots are each running just a single lane of PCIe Gen 3. With how Unraid usually works, you're just going to get the read and write performance of a single drive. So even though I might have been writing to or reading from an NVMe rather than the SATA SSDs, I was still going to be limited to the PCIe Gen 3x1 bandwidth, which is why we saw transfers just cap out at a little over 800 megabytes per second. Now honestly, as soon as I saw an N100, I pretty much expected this, and I don't think it's really that big of a deal. However, I really wish they would actually show the specs of the M.2 sockets on their website, especially since they're marketing this as a 10 gig NAS and shipping it with an operating system that will essentially never be able to actually hit 10 gig transfers. But like I said, that's partially just because of how Unraid typically operates. If you were to run something like RAID 1 or RAID 10, etc., you should get better performance. So to test that, I installed TrueNAS, and I thought this might be a great way to utilize that onboard eMMC. With that as the boot drive, you could free up all of the other 6 drives just for storage. The problem though is that when you actually try to install TrueNAS onto the eMMC, you just get an error. Fortunately though, thanks to some help on the TrueNAS forums from Borja and Dave Devos, sorry if I'm butchering that, I was able to run a simple command to get it working. Also thanks for Jeff Geerling for saving me some time by pointing this out in his video. I don't really understand what this command did, other than I guess it made the installer try more times to communicate with the flash chip, maybe to give it more time to initialize or something. I don't know. But it worked. In TrueNAS, I created a simple striped VDEV with a couple of NVMe drives just to confirm the network performance, and sure enough, I was getting rock solid 10 gig transfers with both reads and writes. It seems like this would work just fine with TrueNAS or really any other operating system you might be interested in since, well, it uses pretty standard PC hardware. Really the only issue I noticed was that after running TrueNAS, the LEDs on the front of the system no longer worked properly. It seems like Link Plus has a proprietary daemon that's running in the provided Unraid install. This controls those front LEDs over the I2C bus. And while some awesome people seem to have done some work to reverse engineer it and get lights working with other operating systems, I didn't take time to try and get that working. So you might have some luck getting that fixed if you really want to, but hey, maybe Link Plus could be cool and release a driver or some documentation or something to help out. That would be pretty awesome. Maybe do that. Oh, there was one other thing I noticed when I was running TrueNAS, but I wouldn't really call this an issue per se. They never actually seem to market those 2.5-inch bays as hot swappable, so I don't think it's a problem that if you try and hot swap them, it won't work. However, in the BIOS, you can enable hot swap on those SATA ports, and well, that seemed to work just fine. Maybe in long-term testing, Link Plus decided that there were some issues or something, or maybe they just didn't think this was a feature people wanted, but well, I guess just know that it seems like it's a feature you can just enable if you choose, but I guess your mileage may vary. I also installed Proxmox to test out how well this could handle some other services, and to also check out the idle power draw. Link Plus advertises the N2 at having a 6 to 10 watt power draw at idle, and that seemed to be pretty accurate throughout my testing. But like I normally do, I installed and ran PowerTop AutoTune, as well as the Auto ASPM script from Not the Bee to try to bring power draw as low as possible. And when sitting at idle, the system was typically drawing just over 6 watts, which considering the 10 gig NIC that's also there, that's pretty impressive. Now I had noticed when I was poking around through the BIOS menu that the CPU power mode was set to max performance, so I changed that to max battery to see if that made a difference. This might have lowered power draw when under load, but it made absolutely no difference when the system was at idle, so I just changed it back to max performance. I also noticed that ASPM was set to disabled on all of the PCIe root ports, and so I decided to try changing them all to auto. This actually did make a difference, but it only brought idle power draw down to 5.5 watts. Now, I didn't notice any stability issues after that in my brief testing, but the potential for that to introduce problems in the future might not be worth half a watt, especially when the thing is already pretty much just sipping power. For a quick benchmark, I ran Geekbench 6, and the N2 performed quite a bit better here than I was expecting. You can see that it absolutely smoked another N100 mini PC from Camrui, and even outperformed a system with the newer N150, at least in the multi-core benchmarks. Now that N150 system was passively cooled, which might explain the performance gap, but I have two guesses as to why it might have performed better than the other N100 system. One, there might have been a different performance setting configured in the BIOS, and two, well, the N2 uses LPDDR5 instead of DDR4, and I imagine that since the N100 is limited to single channel memory, the improved speed and latency might have made a noticeable difference. I also ran just a few real-world home server workloads, like for example Jellyfin. And yeah, here as you might expect, those integrated graphics are fantastic for transcoding workloads. I also ran a vanilla Minecraft server and Crafty controller, and while it performed okay here, you can start to see the performance limits of the N100. Now to be fair, I was flying around the map in a boat on ice, but occasionally the CPU got behind on chunk generation. If I was moving around the map normally, this wouldn't be an issue, and you can always pre-generate chunks to help with that, and really this would work totally fine for a moderate server with some friends or family, but yeah, it is worth noting that certain workloads might start to push the limits of this little N100. Now one other issue that I haven't mentioned up until this point is the fan. It's actually not that loud to be fair, but I personally found the tone of it to be a bit on the annoying side. It did seem to do a decent job of keeping the CPU cool though. At idle, I was seeing package temps between like 38 to 40 degrees Celsius, and then when running a stress test, it jumped up to the low 70s. Under load, all 4 cores were running at 2.9 GHz, which seems to be the expected behavior of the N100. Now, just for curiosity's sake, I was interested to see what the inside of this looked like, but I do want to be very clear, there is absolutely no reason to open this thing up. There aren't any cool hidden ports, you can't upgrade the RAM or anything, and in fact, you'll probably just mess it up. But I make YouTube videos, so I decided to give it a shot. It took me a little bit to figure out how to open this thing up, but I finally found that if you just remove the 2 T8 screws on the back, you can pop off the top cover pretty easily. There is a ribbon cable to the power button though, which is pretty easy to snap off if you're not careful. From here you could get a look at this odd T-shaped motherboard, or at least the back of it. To get to the front you have to remove a bunch of screws, including the screws that secure the board to the heatsink. After that you can pull it out, and as you can see here, there really isn't much to it. You have the N100, the DRAM modules, and the eMMC flash chip. That's really about it. This does give you a look at the cooling solution though, which is just this tiny heatsink and fan. Oh, and there's also a thermal pad between a metal plate on the lid of the system and the back of the board behind the CPU to help dissipate heat as well, which that's kinda neat, I guess. As I said though, doing this is probably just going to cause you a lot of headache. I don't really know what thermal interface they were using here to bridge the gap between the heatsink and the CPU, but it was a bit thicker than like CPU paste, but it wasn't quite a thermal pad. So I just ended up dumping a ton of thermal paste back on it to try my best to fill that gap, but well, that definitely caused me to have a little bit worse thermals on this thing after. Now at the time of recording this, you can pick up the Link Station N2 for just over $400. Now, obviously compared to other N100 mini PCs, that's definitely not a good value, and you could probably DIY your own system that's just as good, right? Right? Well, maybe. Obviously, I love DIY builds, and I especially love repurposing older hardware, but if I'm being honest, trying to match the specs of this is going to be pretty challenging if you're going the DIY route. If you like the performance and efficiency of the N100, you can go pick up boards that use it right now. But especially with current prices, once you toss in 16 gigs of RAM, some sort of boot SSD, a 10 gig network card, and a case to put it all in, you might already be spending upwards of $300. Adding a couple SATA drives is pretty easy, but 4 NVMe sockets, that's tough. Most motherboards might have 1 or maybe 2 sockets, but to add more than that, you're going to need multiple PCIe slots and adapters, unless your motherboard supports bifurcation, but even still you're going to need an adapter. And even if you do manage to get all of that sorted out on a decent budget, good luck trying to fit it all in a tiny 10-inch rack. Oh, and I guess if you were planning to use Unraid, you'd also have to pay another $50 for that license as well. Now, clearly many people are not going to be looking for these exact specs or form factor, and in that case, sure, yeah, there are probably much better options, especially if you want to go the DIY route. But if you like or need what this little guy offers, $400 honestly doesn't seem all that bad. Hopefully that price tag lasts for a while, we'll have to see. Overall, I came away liking the system a lot more than I thought I would. And hopefully you came away from this video liking it more than you thought you would. If so, maybe consider hitting the like button or subscribing to see more, or becoming a Raid member for as little as $1 a month. With that, you get early access to all of my videos and 0 ads. That's about it for this one though, so as always, thank you guys so much for watching, stay curious, and I really can't wait to see you in the next one.